Well, it's been a week to remember for Nigerians, most likely for those who are 40 years and over, as the nation again went through the motions, some will say emotions, of remembering the life and times of Chief Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola, the acclaimed winner of the June 12, 1993 presidential election. The mercurial philanthropist was practically coasting home to victory when the military hierarchy at the time decided it was going to be against their interest to allow him emerge president and subsequently annul the election midway. For a bit of reflection on those watershed moments and the expected role of young people in safeguarding Nigerian democracy, we are now being joined by Rinsola Abiola, one of the surviving children of Chief Abiola and currently Senior Special Assistant to President Tinubu on Citizenship and Leadership. Good morning, Rinsola. Good to have you join us on the morning show today. Rinsola, can you hear me? Good morning from Lagos.
Yes, I can. Good morning. Good morning from Abuja. Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here. I can hear you clearly.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so Democracy Day was celebrated a few days ago. And of course, it's essentially about your father. And I should say congratulations, given the fact that Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the president, chose not to have an elaborate celebration on May 29th. Instead, deferred it till last, Wednesday to celebrate Democracy Day. I know that you were quite young when MKO passed on, but the president, Bola Tinubu, spoke glowingly about your father at the Eagle Square. So much so that he even said that he represents the symbol of our democracy much more than any other person. What are your thoughts about the fact that from former President Buhari, who, of course, honored your dad with the Democracy Day, and Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu speaking glowingly about him and, of course, attributing what we now enjoy, 25 years of unbroken democracy, to your father. How emotional are these developments to you, and what are your thoughts on 1 year anniversary of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu?
So firstly, I would say that June 12 has always been an emotional day, an emotional period for me, especially growing up and considering the circumstances in which my father passed. And when President Muhammadu Buhari declared June 12 as a rightful Democracy Day, I took that as a sign of justice and the right thing finally being done. And yes, the June 12 elections were essentially about my dad and people coming together to vote for the leader they wanted, irrespective of their faith, irrespective of their ethnic nationality. They just wanted what was right for the country. And it is an honor that my father was the person who was deemed appropriate to lead Nigeria at that time. And that people fought so hard for the restoration of that mandate. But then, of course, God had other plans, and we cannot question God. However, I am very thankful. I remain exceedingly thankful to President Muhammadu Buhari for doing the right thing by designating June 12 as the rightful Democracy Day. And I'm also very thankful to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for carrying on, for doing the right thing, for speaking to the issues that need to be spoken to, and above all, for also embodying the values that democracy represents, the very ethos of democracy. And for me, his speech on June 12, well, the acknowledgement of my father is wonderful and it's great. But I was also very taken by aspects of the presidential broadcast that spoke to things like the labor challenge we're having and the issue of the new national minimum wage and the fact that this is an administration that is doing everything within its power to engage with democratic rules and not looking to stifle anyone's rights. That means a lot to me because the democracy that my father fought for and that eventually, he laid his life down for is one that respects the rights of Nigerians, the freedom of Nigerians. And the entire point of transitioning from military rule to democracy is that the rights of people are respected. So I'm actually very happy that we have a president who recognizes that. And I'm also quite honored to be part of an administration, serving this administration as Senior Special Assistant to the President, to a president who understands the fundamentals of democracy and has demonstrated his willingness to abide by the principles underpinning the concept.
about your work with the Citizenship and Leadership Training Center. You've in the past mentioned the need to rework the CLTC legislation. Can you elaborate on this proposed legislative changes and how you believe they would enhance the center's capacity to deliver on its mandate? And also, given the limited resources available, what strategies are you employing to mobilize necessary resources for upgrading the infrastructure and training facilities?
So I would give a bit of a background on my portfolio, because a lot of people, when they hear SSAP, Citizenship and Leadership, they think it has to do with things like passports and diaspora engagement. I mean, it's part of it, but the main, my office is domiciled in the Ministry of Youth Development. So firstly, it's a youth development office. And I also supervise the Citizenship and Leadership Training Center, which is a pre-independence organization. It's the parent body of the Man O' War organization, the volunteer organization, and it was created in 1951. So an organization created as at that time is one that definitely needs very critical upgrades to enable it deliver on its mandate. It was established as an outward bound youth leadership development outfit. That they also have programs meant to develop young people's leadership capacities, meant to promote civic education, political literacy, to imbibe the right set of values in our young people. But the organization has been severely hindered by quite a number of challenges over the decades. It's the body that gave birth to NYSC, and since the emergence of NYSC, we've had a gradual shift of attention onto NYSC, pretty much to the detriment of CLTC. So what we are trying to do now is ensure that the Citizenship and Leadership Training Center is able to better deliver on its mandate. And I understand that to get anything done in a democracy, right, there are three arms of government. There's the executive, where I work. There's the legislature, which is the bastion of democracy. And whatever it is that we're trying to do needs to be underpinned by legislation to ensure that the reforms we're trying to introduce are sustainable in the long term. And we're not just relying on the goodwill of the president, who, of course, is very supportive of young people. So my office is now working to get the needed legislative backing for the reforms that CLTC needs to be able to deliver fully on its mandate. And one of those is to ensure that we're able to also engage young people in the informal sector. So NYSC caters to young people who have gone through the university system or who have the equivalent of a BSc, those who have gone through the Polytechnic and have an HND. However, the large majority of young Nigerians are in the informal sector, and there's really no agency really engaging them properly. So we're trying to introduce a scheme that also then caters to young people in the informal sector, and also those who are graduates of non-university tertiary institutions. And in doing this, we're not trying to have them serve for a full year like NYSC itself. We're looking to also leverage off of existing NYSC infrastructure, just have them in camps, train them on civic education and civic responsibilities for the 3-week period, and then have them go on to live their lives and carry on about their work. So we're not looking to reinvent the wheel, and we're being very mindful of the need to be prudent. And I have to express my profound appreciation to Honorable Martins Essen, who is the chairman of the House Committee on Youth Development. He has been a wonderful ally in our quest to get the needed changes through for CLTC and to get the legislative backing for what we need to do. And I would also like to thank the Honorable Minister for Youth Development, Dr. Jamila Bayo Ibrahim, and the Honorable Minister of State, Honorable Ayodele Olawande, for their support, and the Chief of Staff to the President as well for their support in trying to get these reforms through. So I sat down with the management of the center to then itemize the changes that we need to see. And Honorable Martins is now spearheading that effort to get those changes done. And I'm also working with civil society organizations, including Yaga Africa, to also be able to develop a critical mass to be able to push for these reforms and prepare young people for what is to come through the CLTC. Now, the challenge of funding. The major challenge with government, in my opinion, is not that we don't want to get things done. It's that there is an inexhaustible list of things that need to be done. We have a very long list of priorities, but not enough resources to be able to get these things done. However, I come from a background of pitch decks, like I like to say, and I understand the power of partnership. So I've been quite proactive. I've been quite deliberate about engaging organizations that I believe have youth development as a major focus area, and trying to seek their support with getting reforms through for the CLTC and also supporting other initiatives by my office. So these are UN organizations, international development partners, international organizations, private sector organizations, and even those within government as well that we've been able to forge partnerships with. And we're still carrying on with these. We're pitching to quite a number of people, actually. Now, CLTC has training schools across the country, 11, 12 if you include the online school. And all of these schools are in different stages of disrepair, just to be frank about it. In the C school in Lagos, we don't have power. I have sought the kind assistance of the Honorable Minister with reaching out to those who may be able to help us assist to restore power to the C school. And we're trying to see what we can do in terms of infrastructural upgrades as well. So all of these, we've conducted a very thorough needs assessment, and we're engaging prospective partners to see how much we're able to do in terms of resource mobilization, and then we can begin to make things happen. I'm also quite hopeful that going into the next legislative year, or going into the next fiscal year, I'm hopeful that CLTC will have a larger envelope so that more can be done for those training institutions with what is made available in terms of budgetary allocation.
Thank you so much. Now, you've shed light on how collaboration with the executive arm of government, whether it be yourself or the ministers, and the legislative arm with the members of the House of Reps is necessary for progress. But I was going to ask you if you believe that there's maybe too many hands involved, and if the bureaucracies on the higher level of government sometimes impede progress or make it quite slow, and what advice you would have for youth, especially in light of June 12th and Democracy Day. What advice do you have for youth who wish to see progress in the country and in their government in terms of getting involved, and in terms of citizenship and leadership? What advice do you have to the youth?
So I would say that regarding the question about bureaucracy, in government, no matter how good your intentions are, you need to ensure that all the necessary stakeholders are aware of what you're doing, and that you're following due process. And I'm very big on due process.
We're discussing with Rinsola Abiola, the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Citizenship and Leadership. I believe you were talking before we went on a break there for our technical difficulties. I believe you were talking about the advice you have for young people in terms of getting engaged in politics in the country, and also the collaboration needed for progress in Nigeria.
Yes. Thank you very much. So yes, I was speaking about the fact that regarding collaboration, I believe there was a question as well about bureaucracy. It's very important to do things properly and to ensure that the needed stakeholders are aware of the work that one is trying to do through one's office. Then on the issue of collaboration in a broader sense, it's very key that we understand that partnership is key to making progress. We all have different skill sets, we have different things that we're good at, but if we're able to work together and bring all our different skills to the table, it makes the work of attaining progress a lot easier, especially within youth circles with a demographic like ours that's trying to attain sufficient representation in government, in politics, and in other fields of endeavor as well. And regarding young people and democracy specifically, I would like to make an appeal to young Nigerians. Everything about this country is about us. Nigeria has a population made up significantly of young people. The youth demographic accounts for about 65 to 70% of the youth of the Nigerian population. And this just goes to show that whatever it is that happens now, whatever it is that happens today, will affect our generation a lot more significantly than others. So there's a need for us to get involved. The whole essence of democracy is that it should enable popular participation. It's a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And the majority of the people cannot afford to stand aloof as decisions are being made that would no doubt impact their future. So there is a need for young people to get involved. We need to join political parties. We need to exert influence within those political parties. We need to organize within that political system. And yes, I understand that not all of us will be politicians or members of parties or even supporters of parties, but we can all be active citizens, and we need to be active citizens. So we need to learn to organize, to engage, to show up when it's time to vote. The PVC is more than just a valid ID card. It is what gives you the ability as a citizen to perform that function. Our democracy was hard fought. It claimed my father's life. It claimed the lives of so many other democracy activists. It claimed the lives of citizens who came out to protest when the entire process was truncated. Many had to go on exile, including our president now, President Buhari Tinubu. So many people fought really hard for the democracy and for the freedom that we enjoy now. And I understand that a lot of young people now were either born towards the tail end of military rule or even after we had transitioned to democracy, and they cannot really understand what it means to live under the barrel of a gun. So it's very important, please, that we try to learn our history as well and to understand that this democracy we have now requires the participation of all of us as young people to ensure that it actually delivers on our yearnings and aspirations collectively. So please play your part. Please do your best to learn about civic responsibilities, to fulfill your civic responsibilities, to know who your leaders are, to be actively involved in that process. And by all means, I encourage young people to infiltrate, in quotes, the political party system and, begin to also occupy key positions within political parties.
All right, thank you very much, Rinsola. But just two quick questions before we let you go. First is to know your thoughts regarding the imbroglio surrounding the proposed minimum wage in Nigeria. 1 year after the administration of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu has not been able to come to a conclusion with the labor unions on what would be ideal. I'm asking for your thoughts because this concerns not just the white-collar jobs, but because of the youth, a constituency that you very much represent, in terms of what's an ideal entry point salary. So first question will be, what's your thought? What do you think will be ideal? 100, 150, or 250 as Labour is insisting? And the second part of the question, again, to know your thoughts, on Wednesday, June 12th, at the Eagle Square, a gigantic portrait was unveiled at that ceremony. The promoters of that portrait fancy it to be the largest in the world, even though that is yet to be confirmed. Were you pleased or were you disappointed that it was the president's portrait that was unveiled as a symbol of democracy on that day? Or would you have preferred that it ought to have been your dad who fought for democracy, who died for democracy?
So I will begin with the first question, and I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going to be stating or recommending a figure. I will, however, provide a bit of a background on what I think and why I think so. Firstly, again, this is entirely my personal opinion, and I understand that I work in the presidency. My views do not represent the views of my employer, as I have said on my social media accounts as well. But I would like to say that, firstly, we run a federal system. And what obtains in Lagos is not necessarily what obtains in Zamfara. In fact, Zamfara didn't start paying the minimum wage of 30,000 naira until some weeks ago. So I think we have to be very mindful of the fact that when it comes to our states, fingers are not equal. Secondly, the issue of the minimum wage impacts not just the public sector, which is government, it also impacts the private sector as well. We also have to be mindful of the fact that the bulk of jobs within the Nigerian economy are actually in the informal sector. And it's very key because a lot of young people are engaged in the informal sector as well. And we need to understand that when you have a significant increase in a benchmark like the minimum wage, we could inadvertently exacerbate the challenge of youth unemployment and youth underemployment. And how would that be an issue? It is because the cost of operating would be higher. And employers would want to prioritize their profits and their margins beyond whatever ideal of keeping people employed. And if the minimum wage is too high, it's going to result in job losses eventually. And again, we have to be mindful of the fact that it's not just the federal government, it's not just state governments, many of whom cannot pay anything that is too high. The private sector is also involved. So there are quite a number of moving parts, and there are quite a number of players, quite a number of actors who are involved in the decision that needs to be made. Now, Labour also have there are merits to their argument. I'm not anti-Labour, I'm not anti-people, but I think we also need to be mindful of the fact that this country is very dynamic. And as I said earlier, fingers are not equal. What we can afford to pay in Lagos is not what we can afford to pay in Cross River. It's not what we can afford to pay in Borno. It's not what we can afford to pay in Kogi. These figures will always differ. So if we don't want to push for a figure that would just be a figure on paper that people end up contravening, I think there's a need to be realistic. And this isn't me being unmindful of the economic realities at the moment. I'm very mindful of those. We're all feeling it, really. And so regarding that, I think I would have to just echo the sentiments of the NLC president, who said that the proposal is now before the president. And I know that the president is a man who has empathy, who really does want the best for our people. And I have faith in the president's sense of justice and fairness, and I'm confident that he will approve something that would be fine and that would be fair and that would be just. Would that be more
than the 62,000 that has been proposed to the president? Something that is fair, that is just. I
can't speak to that. I guess we'll just all have to.
Okay.
We would all just,
I get you.
We would all just have to wait and see. Thank you.
I get you.
Now, regarding the question of the banner, I was really hoping you wouldn't ask me that. But I would say that I would say that one, there has never been any doubt in my mind as to the president's commitment to the MKO ideology, so to speak. He loves my father. He loved him, and he still does. He very deeply inspired by my father, and that influence is still something that we can all see. Incidentally, when you were talking about his Democracy Day speech and his comments at Eagle Square, I was also going to make reference to his Democracy Day broadcast in 2023, shortly after he took over the reins of leadership. He has always made reference to my father and other key democracy activists who contributed and massively to the entire democracy struggle, including the press. So I have no doubts whatsoever as to the president's love for my father, even in death. And honestly, I think it's a non-issue. I understand that people are entitled to their views, and it's just something I would not want to comment on. I think it's just not an issue that I really would want to comment on. But people are entitled to their opinion, but I honestly don't think that he meant any harm, or that the organizers of the event meant any harm, because it's also important to understand that when events of this magnitude are planned, it's not the president sitting down and saying, do this or do that, or do this and do that. I don't think anybody involved in that process at any point meant any harm or meant to slight my father or the family in any way.
All right, Rinsola, Abiola, we understand you, and we want to thank you for a brilliant outing today on The Morning Show. I mean, the MKO DNA
thank you very much.
Is undeniable. The brilliance, the erudition. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.